United States President Donald Trump has signed an order that imposes tariffs on steel and aluminium being imported to the US. But in a concession to America's neighbours, the tax will not apply to Canada or Mexico.
Today, I'm defending America's national security by placing tariffs on foreign imports of steel and aluminum. The American steel aluminum industry has been ravaged by aggressive foreign trade practices. It's really an assault on our country.
And across to RT's Samira Khan, who's in Washington, D.C. Samira, quite a dramatic step then from Trump. Despite those warnings, this could spark a trade war.
Yes, well, despite domestic and international backlash, Trump has signed a proclamation imposing a 25% tariff on steel imports and a 10% tariff on aluminum imports, encouraging companies to buy American. Now, the president argues that protecting these industries will guarantee economic and national security. However, Trump has offered relief to some U.S. allies. The tariffs will not apply to imports from Canada and Mexico, at least temporarily until NAFTA is renegotiated. Now, even though Trump has received some domestic applause from unions in particular, that wasn't the case internationally. When he first announced these new tariffs on Twitter, the world was furious. Officials all over the globe even threatened retaliation. Let's take a quick look.
Choosing a trade war is surely the wrong prescription. China will certainly make an appropriate and necessary response.
We will defend our interests if needs come.
I'm convinced that increased tariffs will hurt us all in the long run.
Trade wars are bad and easy to lose.
Well, Trump has stated in the past that he sees nothing wrong with trade wars, and now other allies are threatening tariffs on U.S. imports of peanuts, juice, alcohol, etc. But Trump's move has been met with domestic backlash as well from both Democrats and Republicans who believe that protectionism harms national security. Now, more than 100 House Republican members signed a letter on Wednesday expressing a deep concern about the plan, suggesting to change the course of action to, quote, avoid unintended negative consequences to the U.S. economy and its workers. But considering that Canada and Mexico have been exempt, one can't help but wonder if these tariffs are intended to hit China. Trump has listed China as a threat to national security, and he's repeatedly expressed the need to counter China, so we can't be too sure. But it'll definitely be interesting to see how China, the EU, and other U.S. allies react to this.
Many thanks, Samira Khan. Bringing us the latest there from Washington. Now, while unveiling his new tariffs, President Trump invited metal industry workers to get involved in a group photograph in the Oval Office, but he appeared to have forgotten an important detail.
Would you like to take a picture in the Oval Office? I assume you've all been many times into the Oval Office. Come on, let's go and do that. Let's go and do that. Yes, I'm going to do. We'll go into the Oval Office. We're going to sign this up. We'll go into the Oval Office. We'll have a picture, OK? OK, thank you.
Yeah, Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin heard there, just reminding the President he hadn't actually yet signed the order. The plan has received broad support from steel and aluminium firms in the United States. OK, let's get some analysis on this story now from Jeffrey Tucker. He's the editorial director at the American Institute for Economic Research. Great to have you on, Jeffrey. Donald Trump says the decision to impose these tariffs is to protect the US industries from aggressive trade practices. It's something he's kind of had in the pipeline for a long time, it seems. Do you believe that that is the real motive?
Donald Trump is a convinced mercantilist. Behind a quarter century in time, maybe even 500 years in time, a revanchist and a reactionary on trade policy. And let me just be extremely clear about this. American economists do not support this. American newspapers do not support this. Intellectuals do not support this. The American people do not support this. American manufacturers, small business, medium-sized business, even big business, banks, there's very little support for this. So how does it happen? Donald Trump has total authority in this one realm, trade policy. He can make his own judgments, his own decisions, which is truly tragic. I would say even unconstitutional. And it just so happens we have a perfect storm here. Protectionism is at the very core of who he is as a person. His politics are all bound up with the longing for trade war, and it's tragic that he has this power to do this. It's going to hurt Americans more than anybody else, but it's also going to hurt the rest of the world. I would warn that it's going to create a trade war, but he has tweeted out that he wants a trade war. So I'm deeply sorry for this. It's truly embarrassing for every intelligent American to see this kind of thing happening in our country.
What kind of reaction would you anticipate from American allies, those it has traditionally traded with?
Well, I think we've seen it already, right? It's retaliation, a sense of we can be stupid too. It puts everybody in a very difficult position because now they have to stand up to this absurdity. You know, I look over the last 50 years. There aren't that many good things that happened, but one thing that's happened is that trade has gotten freer and more peaceful, and we have something like a consensus, or at least we did, in the world community in favor of free trade and lower tariff barriers. And this guy is using his power to blow it all up. I hope it's temporary. By the way, you know, we none of us wanted this to happen. I mean, just so that it's clear. I mean, we lived with this guy for a year. None of us knew what Donald Trump was going to do as president. And he did a lot of very good things, tax cuts, deregulation, everything was going well. And when his support rose as a result of those good policies, now he unveils his true desire, which is to divide the world and bring about, you know, essentially, a reactionary kind of policy, and it's tragic. My own hope is that the damage won't be too severe, but already it's going to be very severe. It's a tax. It's against diplomacy. It's contrary to world community. It's a real setback for the world economy, and truly tragic.
What's it going to mean for consumers? Are the extra expenses going to be passed on to them?
Yes, of course. I mean, you know, he gave it. You know, we got a tax cut passed by the Republican Congress in November of 2017. This reverses all the gains that came from that tax cut and brings us something else entirely. Basically, it's excise taxes. It's going to hurt every business in America. We're not talking about two products, steel and aluminum. We're talking about millions of products. And the unfolding of retaliation could affect everything we do. We only have to look back to the Smoot-Hawley tariff that started the Great Depression and see the dangers, or the 2002 import tariffs on steel, which were a disaster, and everybody recognizes that. This whole battle about America and steel is as I say, is 20 years old, is 25 years old. We're resolved. You know, America's already retooled. We have new products, new industries, new service industries that have replaced a large part of what was outsourced in the 1980s and 1990s. We're already done with this battle. It's almost like, you know, Donald Trump is like Rumpelstiltskin. Like he woke up after a quarter of a century and said, hey, what's happening to our steel industries? There's no good that can come out of this. And we've seen what happened. I mean, his best advisors are resigning. People are fleeing the White House. Republicans are in revolt. You know, every newspaper in America is against it. Every intelligent intellectual is against what's happening. There's a consensus in America on the left and the right, and really across the world, free trade is better than trade war. There seems to be one outlier, Donald Trump, and a handful of special interests, and this is the result. And I consider it truly tragic. And saying that, I'm speaking for millions and millions of Americans.
Jeffrey, appreciate your time and your thoughts. Jeffrey Tucker is my guest, editorial director at the American Institute for Economic Research.
My pleasure.